Hi again, this is Professor Innes, and this is your 11th module on this course of Classics of Western Philosophy. And as we said before in our Introduction to Metaphysics, we're dealing a great deal with these considerations of universals. And you've already discussed Plato, and Plato's understanding of universals is that the essentials, which draw particular objects together, are made up as independent reality. Namely, what we have is an understanding of these universals which exist independent of human beings. It's independent of our opinion, likes, dislikes, or whatever. So, the one I'll pick on today, I think I've mentioned this one before, is the definition of mammal. Now, in order to be a mammal, you have to possess these essential characteristics of what it is to be a mammal. For Plato, this is something that was in existence before even mammals came into being. It's a method, it's a consideration that in order to be this particular universal, you possess these essential characteristics. And we know the essentials of what it is to be a mammal. You know, warm-blooded, gives birth to live young, so forth and so on. So, with those essentials, if you have those essentials, you belong to that group of mammal. So, that's what makes this up as a universal. Now, these universals, according to Plato, exist independent of us. Now, John Locke comes along 2,000 years later. Obviously, there were philosophers in between, but nonetheless, Locke is part of the Enlightenment, and he's allowed to embark upon this questioning of Plato, and maybe argue that he's wrong. Aristotle did argue that Plato is wrong as well, but not quite as distinct as John Locke himself. So Locke comes along. He argues that there is essentialism, but essentialism is made up in the mind. It's a mental concept. So when we look at this definition of mammal, we look at it as being something we human beings have constructed in order to make sense of our world. It's not that this is something independent of us. It is the case that we have done it. Now, fair enough, these are still essentials. You know, in order to have a mammal, you've got to have the certain qualities, the essential characteristics. But nonetheless, we human beings have come about creating this universal. But nonetheless, it still exists as a concept. And if it's a reasonable concept, then the rest of us say, okay, I can live with this. This is something which is very useful, and I've got no good reason to reject it. So if one is a zoologist or biologist or whatever, whoever deals with mammals, you'll say to yourself, okay, right, this is fine with me. It doesn't sound quite ideal. I don't know why all these different particulars, such as humans and whales and squirrels, are all part of the same group, but I guess it works within our field of study, so I'll just keep it as it is. But you've got to realize here with John Locke, we are understanding that these universals are made up by human beings. They're made up to make sense of the world in which we live. So there's a big difference here, or you might argue there's a small difference. You may actually come up with an understanding that Locke's different interpretation of universals is not that much of a shift from what Plato put forward. Yeah, that's for you to think about and come up with an understanding. But it is nonetheless a shift from understanding that these realities exist independent of us to a state whereby there are no realities. It's just a concept. It's a concept in our mind set up by human beings, and that makes the big difference. So that's Plato's situation. Now with Plato, keep in mind as well, he talks about these things called accidental characteristics. John Locke thinks about accidental characteristics. So with Locke, we've got these accidental characteristics, and Plato does not talk about these accidental characteristics. So we may have a big difference there. So keep that in mind, namely accidental characteristics. And these are the things which will make one particular different from another particular. So it might be the case here that we've got this definition of mammal, and the mammal has all the characteristics to make it a mammal, but thereafterwards we'll notice that the dolphin and the human being all have those characteristics, but they also have lots of accidental characteristics which make a world of difference. So you may therefore, with your interpretation, say here with conceptualism, we end up with a far different thing or particular than we would like to have, considering we say that they possess the same essential characteristics which make them a member of the same group, to the point whereby we might just say they are very different from each other, that every particular is far different from another particular, again to the point whereby are they really part of the same group? I mean, yes, they are in the same group, but for the sake of convenience, but there's no reality there. There's no, sense that this is something I would imagine to be the case under all circumstances. It seems like these universals have been constructed just for convenience. So in that way, we're not keen to say this is a reality, an independent reality. It is a concept in the mind. So that's how we're going to consider these concepts. And again, at this point as well, you may think about preferences. Which one do you prefer? Do you prefer Locke's conceptualism, or do you prefer Plato's forms? The implications are quite clear once you think about the two philosophers and their universals, view of universals. With Plato, is the case, these independent realities are going to be understood, but I don't know by how many. Is it going to be a few people understanding these forms? Because in the allegory of the cave, it seems that the majority of the population live in total oblivion. They're in that cave, they do not understand reality. Therefore, only a few understand that reality. So with that, are there just a few people? If there's just a few people, therefore this justifies elitism, and it abolishes the notion of a democracy as being a farce. With John Locke, it is the case that these concepts are made up by human beings, therefore they're not necessarily right or wrong, and you're not necessarily going to agree with them. You can be in a position to disagree with these universals. Therefore, that leads towards democracy, and it leads towards some type of democracy anyway. I don't know, it's a full-fledged democracy here, but nonetheless, it leads to people's ability to criticize these universals and come up with a different way of thinking. Right, so the implications are there. So we have to be careful about which one we accept, Plato or Locke, because both of them lead towards a different way of life. By a different way of life, I mean here to do with politics, the social world in which we live, and so forth and so on. But nonetheless, it's for you to think about. Okay, for your journal entry, therefore, please think or name two circumstances where Locke's conceptualism rejects Plato's forms. Name two circumstances where Locke's conceptualism rejects Plato's forms. The example I have put forward would be that of the mammal. So don't use this one, put forward two more examples, please. The one I'm using here is the mammal, and I could easily argue by the use of Locke's conceptualism that this just seems to be something that somebody's made up for good purpose, good reason, by all means, but nonetheless, I can't imagine this definition of mammal as something that exists independent of us. It seems to be too arbitrary. Obviously, I have to write a whole book on this to fully justify the argument, but all we need is a paragraph with this one. So with these two circumstances, write 100 words on each, please. 100 words on each to explain this. And keep in mind, with these journal entries and all the other work, it does feed into the next piece of work. The more you do now, the less you have to do later on, because you've got all this information you can use in your essays and exams and so forth. Okay, not word for word, but the ideas. We use the ideas. So again, name two circumstances where Locke's conceptualism rejects Plato's forms. Okay, so please let me know if you need anything, and I'll speak to you soon online with the journals. Okay, bye for now.